I had just hit hour 7 on the road when the crackling voice of the GPS pulled me out of my highway-induced haze. Turn right in 2 miles. The endless stretch of trees framing the highway had given me an eerie comfort until now. But the GPS wanted me to detour. Odd, since I thought I was following a major route. I tapped the screen, revealing a winding red line cutting through what appeared to be back roads. There was no signal, so recalculating wasn't an option. Against my better judgment, and too tired to argue, I obeyed. The turnoff was barely marked, a narrow road shrouded in shadows from looming pines. The air felt colder immediately. My headlights barely pierced the black. The road so narrow it felt like it would collapse in on itself. Something in me screamed to turn back. But of course, I didn't listen. The first sign of trouble came about 15 minutes later. I passed a rusted-out pickup truck parked awkwardly on the shoulder, its driver's side door hanging open. No sign of anyone around. Just the sound of my tires crunching gravel and the persistent thrum of my engine. I didn't stop, but as I glanced in my rearview mirror, I saw movement. A shadow darting from behind the truck into the trees. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. It's nothing. Just tired, I muttered to myself, trying to ignore the prickling unease crawling up my spine. Ahead, the road curved sharply to the left, and as I came around it, my heart dropped. There, in the middle of the road, was a deer, but it wasn't standing or grazing. It was lying there, mangled. Its body was twisted unnaturally, and as my headlights illuminated the carcass, I noticed the way its ribs jutted out of its torso like jagged branches. Something had gutted it. Recently. I didn't want to linger long enough to find out what. My tires bumped as I drove around the deer, and I forced myself to stare straight ahead. My breathing was shallow now, my chest tight. The road seemed even darker, the trees pressing closer. And then, the radio crackled. I hadn't turned it on, but suddenly a voice, distorted and low, echoed through the car. "Don't look back." I slammed on the brakes, nearly sending myself into the dashboard. The voice was gone. Dead silence filled the car again, save for my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I reached for the radio dial, fingers trembling. But as I did, something caught my eye in the rearview mirror. There was something, standing in the middle of the road behind me. It was tall, impossibly tall, its silhouette barely discernible against the blackness. Its limbs were too long, its head cocked unnaturally to the side, as if it were studying me. I didn't wait. I floored the gas pedal, my tires screeching as I tore down the road. The GPS was still dead, but I didn't care. I just needed to find a way out of these woods. The road grew rougher, potholes jolting me so hard I thought my suspension might give out. My high beams caught glimpses of the woods around me, broken branches, a strange white mist clinging to the ground. And then, just ahead, I saw it. A house. It was a ramshackle thing, barely standing, with its windows blacked out and the porch sagging like an old spine. But there was light, a faint flicker, like a candle, in one of the windows. I had no intention of stopping, but as I neared, my engine sputtered, and then died. The silence that followed was deafening. I tried the ignition. Nothing. My phone was useless. The signal was long gone. And then I heard it, a soft tapping, like nails on glass. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. The back window was fogged up, but I could make out the faint outline of a hand pressed against the glass, fingers too long, too thin. And then a face, pale, hollow-eyed, staring. It smiled. My body moved before my brain caught up. I threw open the door and bolted, my legs carrying me towards the house. I didn't care if it was a bad idea. The thing was behind me, and I needed walls between us. The porch groaned under my weight as I pounded on the door. "Help, please!" I shouted, my voice cracking. No answer. I twisted the handle, and to my surprise, the door creaked open. Inside was worse. The air smelled of rot and something metallic. The floorboards were sticky beneath my boots. Shadows danced unnaturally, the single candle on the table casting a sickly yellow light. And then I saw them. Photographs, lining the walls. All of them of people. Travelers like me. Some smiling, some mid-laugh, others looking straight into the lens with vacant, haunted expressions. But the most disturbing part was the last photo, hung crookedly at the end of the hall. It was me, standing at the door, from minutes ago. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my legs frozen in place. It was there, tall, gaunt, its smile stretching impossibly wide. And then, it spoke. "Welcome home." I didn't scream. I couldn't. My breath hitched, throat dry, as the thing stepped forward. Its long fingers curled against the doorframe, nails scraping the wood with a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Stay back," I whispered, the words barely audible. It cocked its head, its hollow eyes glinting with something. Amused. Like it understood I was afraid, and it liked that. The air around me felt heavy, like the walls were pressing in, suffocating me. I took a step back, my boot catching on the warped floorboards. My ankle twisted, and I nearly fell, catching myself on the edge of the table. The candle flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows of the thing's figure against the walls. It moved closer, silent, fluid. I stumbled down the hallway, past the photographs, and into a room at the end. It was small, claustrophobic, with no windows and only a single chair in the middle. The walls were covered in scratches, desperate claw marks, some so deep the wood splintered. I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it, my chest heaving. My mind raced, searching for some kind of plan, some way out. The silence was worse than the sound of its movements. It wasn't pacing outside the door, wasn't clawing at it, wasn't trying to get in. It was just there, waiting. Then softly, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap from the other side of the door. I bit down on my lip to stop myself from crying out. My shaking hands searched the room for anything. A weapon, a clue, anything to give me an edge. But it was empty, save for the chair and those marks on the walls. The tapping stopped. Then in a low, guttural voice that sounded like it came from everywhere and nowhere, it spoke again. "Don't run." I shoved away from the door, my head snapping around the room. There had to be another way out. My eyes fell on the floor. There, beneath the chair, was a trapdoor. I scrambled towards it, yanking the chair out of the way and pulling at the rusted latch. It wouldn't budge. "Please, please," I muttered, my fingers bleeding as I pried at the metal. And then the door behind me creaked open. The trapdoor gave way just as I turned to see it standing in the doorway. Its smile was gone now, replaced by an expression I couldn't read. Anger? Hunger? Both? I dropped into the darkness below, the wooden ladder groaning under my weight. I didn't care where it led, as long as it was away from that thing. My feet hit solid ground, and I found myself in a narrow tunnel. The air was damp and cold, the walls slick with something I didn't want to think about. The only light came from the faint glow filtering through the cracks in the trapdoor above. And then, from up there, I heard the ladder creak. It was coming. I ran, my boots splashing through shallow puddles as the tunnel twisted and turned. The further I went, the stranger it became. The walls started to shift, the wood giving way to jagged stone. Shapes carved into the rock glowed faintly, their alien patterns swirling and pulsing as if alive. The tunnel sloped downward, and I nearly lost my footing as the ground became slicker. My heart pounded, the sound echoing in the tight space. Ahead, the tunnel opened up into a cavern. A faint light emanated from the center, where something hovered, a sphere pulsing with the same eerie glow as the carvings. I didn't have time to think. Behind me, the tunnel echoed with the sound of those impossibly long limbs scraping against the stone. It was gaining on me. The sphere was mesmerizing, its light casting rippling shadows across the cavern walls. As I approached, the air around it vibrated, filling my head with a low hum that made my teeth ache. It wasn't just light. It was alive, watching me. Behind me, the sound stopped. I turned, expecting to see it lunging at me, but instead, it stood at the mouth of the cavern. Its head tilted in that unnatural way. It didn't move. It didn't have to. The light from the sphere pulsed, brighter now, and I felt it pulling me. Not physically, but something deeper, like it was reaching into my mind, my very being. And then I understood. The sphere wasn't my salvation. It was its trap, a lure. "Don't fight it," the voice echoed, though the thing never moved its lips. The air grew heavier, my limbs weaker, as the sphere's glow intensified. My vision blurred, the cavern spinning around me. But then I remembered the photographs, the faces of those before me, the ones who didn't run. "No," I whispered, my voice shaking but resolute. "Not me." I grabbed a loose rock from the ground, its jagged edges cutting into my palm, and hurled it at the sphere. The glow shattered like glass, the cavern plunging into darkness, and then the screaming began. The cavern shook violently as the glow from the sphere exploded, shards of its light piercing the walls like daggers. A deafening, otherworldly scream reverberated through the chamber, high-pitched and guttural at the same time, like nails on a chalkboard mixed with the roar of some colossal beast. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears as pain tore through my skull. The ground beneath me buckled, and I felt a rush of heat as the air around me shifted. Whatever I had done, it wasn't over. It was only getting worse. Through the darkness, I saw it. The thing standing in the cavern's entrance, its long limbs now twitching violently, as though the destruction of the sphere had broken some connection. Its hollow eyes locked onto me, no longer amused or curious. They burned with rage. "You shouldn't have," it hissed, its voice no longer echoing but raw, guttural. "Now you'll see." The walls cracked, glowing veins of molten light creeping through the stone. The cavern was collapsing, the air filling with a sulfuric stench. I stumbled backward, trying to put distance between me and it, but there was nowhere to go. And then, the floor gave out. I plunged into the abyss, my body spinning as chunks of rock and shards of glowing debris tumbled around me. Time seemed to stretch. I couldn't tell if I was falling for seconds or minutes. Finally, I hit something hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. My vision blurred, and I fought to stay conscious. When I opened my eyes, I realized I wasn't in the cavern anymore. I was in the woods. The tall pines loomed over me, their branches tangled together like a net trying to keep me trapped. The air was thick with mist, and everything was eerily silent. No wind, no animals, no sound at all. I pushed myself to my feet, every muscle in my body aching. My car. I needed to find my car, or the road, anything. As I turned, I froze. It was there. Not just one, dozens of them. Tall, gaunt figures, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the mist. They stood in a wide circle around me, motionless, but watching. And then, as one, they tilted their heads. I backed away, my heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I knew there was nowhere to go. They were everywhere, their forms shifting in and out of the mist, as though they were part of it. Then, From behind me, a low growl rumbled. I spun around, and for the first time, I saw something else. It wasn't one of them. It was worse. The creature was massive, its body a writhing mass of smoke and shadow. Eyes, dozens of them, blinked across its form, glowing the same eerie light as the sphere. It opened a mouth filled with jagged, shifting teeth and let out a roar that shook the ground. It wasn't a hunter like the others. It was their master. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I just ran. The forest was a blur, the mist clawing at my skin as if trying to drag me back. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps silent, but their presence suffocating. Ahead, through the trees, I saw a glimmer of light. A road, my car. I pushed harder, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. I burst through the tree line and onto the asphalt, nearly collapsing from the effort. My car sat there, engine idling, headlights piercing the mist like a beacon. But something was wrong. The driver's side door was open. I didn't have time to think. I dove into the car, slamming the door behind me and locking it. My hands fumbled for the gear shift, my breath coming in ragged gasps. As I threw the car into drive, I glanced in the rearview mirror. It was there, sitting in the back seat. The thing tilted its head, its hollow eyes meeting mine. But then it smiled. Not in malice, in resignation. "You won," it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind. "But you're marked now." Before I could react, it dissolved into mist, seeping out through the cracks in the car. I didn't stop driving. Not for hours. Not until the trees gave way to open plains and the sun finally rose, burning away the night. Even then, I kept going, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. But something had changed. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw it. Just for a second, standing on the side of the road, watching me, waiting. I don't know how far I drove that day, or how I ended up safe, back in my own bed. I only know one thing now. You can't outrun it. Not forever.